Well, the weather outside is not quite frightful, but certainly intermittent. It really has been a mixture of sunshine and showers so far this month. But enough's enough. I've got to take the boat out. So while the sun is shining, albeit it's a bit breezy, let's have a little chug. In fact, the wind almost scuppered things from the start, as it was pushing the boat sideways even as I tried to escape the pontoon. But we narrowboaters are made of stern stuff, or, more accurately, the engine was able to give a good push to make the trip towards the marina entrance. Goodbye, fellow moorers at Kings Orchard Marina. It's been a lovely few months through winter/pandemic lockdown staying here. It does rather look like I'm speeding, but I assure you this is because of the extra wide angle on the bow camera lens for this trip. I really was going very slowly indeed. Past Street Hay Wharf moorings, just a few hundred yards further along the canal. Look how long the grass has grown on the towpath, while the Canal and River Trust has been unable to cut it in lockdown. It seems to be great for the wildlife. The bees and the insects are loving the lengthy wilderness. This is the actual wharf part of Street Hay. Lots of interesting boaty activity always going on here. The nasty traffic noise you can hear is the busy A38 dual carriageway running alongside. The canal turns away from it very shortly after this, before ducking back under it again a while later. It's not the most pleasant accompaniment to this stretch for sure. Barely 10 minutes out of the mooring and high drama ensued as a motor cruiser ahead seemed to be barely moving and I was catching it up. And behind me, another boat had appeared from nowhere too. I needed to get a shift on after all. This would involve, gasp, overtaking. This boat had definitely seen me behind them, but I wasn't sure whether they were going to pull over or not. Eventually they made a distinct move to the right, and I put the throttle down for a 4-mile-an-hour fly past, or boat past, and I thanked them as I overtook. Goodness me though, everyone was out on the water that day. Immediately around the corner and another narrowboat was coming the other way. I remind you, the speed is a trick of the camera. We were doing 2 to 3 miles an hour in reality. Straight after them came this chap, who I know from Twitter.
I thought I recognised you.
You're right there.
It's busy today, isn't it?
It is a bit.
And then a third in slow succession. It felt like that famous pedestrian crossing in Tokyo, it was that busy. Then it rained. A lot. People are always asking me for rainy boating footage, so here you go.
As you can see, the sunshine didn't last long. The jacket, the hat are on, and it's drizzling, and it has been briefly torrential. Yeah, the sun has completely vanished.
As the saying goes, it's good weather for ducks. Being England, of course, 20 minutes later it stopped, and there was a hint of a break in the clouds. In fact, it became quite lovely again, especially going down these green corridors. There's only one long mooring spot between Lichfield and Fradley, and this is it, so no surprise to see it busy. As I approached these houses, there was more high drama, as a woman was prevented from walking the towpath by vicious bandits, namely this pair of swans protecting their child. They can get very aggressive, these birds, but the lady did eventually scoot through when they weren't looking. And it is nice to see all the new life, as always, including ducklings. After an hour's travel, I was approaching Fradley. My plan was to go through the junction and head west for another hour or so, although fate was to intervene. First of all, I needed to open the swing bridge. An easy one this, just push it from the towpath, which rather shocked the duck who'd been swimming underneath it. Gently through, the drag of this narrow channel means you use a lot of revs for not a lot of movement. And of course you're required to close it behind you. Again easy, as the boat is held in place by concrete sides here, so it doesn't even need tying up. Fradley is famous for that pub, the Swan, aka the Mucky Duck, which dates from the 1770s, I believe, and I saw recently is up for sale, although closed at present because of the pandemic. A very popular spot normally. This was rather charming, a Morris Minor police car, presumably from the 60s, and with an amusing "not in use" sign in the window. Another lovely bit of history. There are 2 locks above the junction, and the lock volunteers weren't back on duty yet, so there you can see me opening the lower gates. The lock was luckily already emptied, so this only took a moment. Then in, and I had to remember how to operate a lock for the first time in several months. I mentioned fate intervening in my progress. Well, take a look at those skies.
Immediately above the next lock there are some mooring spots, but it's a very popular place as well. I would really like to stop there. Given the look of the skies, I think we are in for a proper downpour imminently.
And even as I headed into the top lock, there was a trickle of rain beginning to spatter the boat and me. In fact, look closely at the scene and you'll notice the waters coming into the lock not only through the leaky gate, but from the skies above as well. I could see this was about to get rather soggy, and so it proved to be. Again, since people have asked me what's boating like in the rain, here's me drenched, working the top paddles. Note to self, buy a plastic poncho. By the time I'd moved the boat out of the lock and was closing the gates behind me, the rain had become epic. The good news is that the normally popular mooring spot, on the right just ahead,
had only one boat there, so there was definitely space for me to pull in. And here I am, taking that space.
Somewhat inevitably, the rain has now almost, not quite, but almost stopped. Oh, I thought there was a roll of thunder, but I think it's a train in the distance. I, however, am pretty drenched and actually quite happy to just stop for the day. I think I've done enough, easing myself slowly back into cruising. Time for a nice cup of tea.
First things first, damp clothes off and a vigorous toweling down. Ooh, I say, steady on. Then, overlooking the rain-soaked but charming countryside view, I got the kettle whistling for that cup of tea. Then the first order of business is always to copy the huge files of footage from the camcorder to the laptop ready for editing. The rain mostly stayed away the rest of the afternoon, and it was a peaceful evening. There'd be more cruising to come the next day. Cheerio.